Welcome to another video on game development with Asha Akanksha Foundation. In this video, we'll make an enemy prefab, we'll learn how to destroy the player, and then we will create a platform prefab. Okay, so let's create an enemy. In the sprites, I think this bird would serve as a really good enemy. I'll rename it to enemy. And so what I want the enemy to be able to do is whenever the player collides with the enemy, I want the player to get destroyed. Also, if I want the enemy to be moving in a particular direction and to change its direction if it encounters an obstacle. So my game might have obstacles in between. Right now, like we do not have any obstacles, but say for example, if I add this obstacle here, whenever the bird collides with this obstacle, I want it to turn its direction in the opposite direction. So let's see how we can implement that. Firstly, we'll add a collider. We want to add, so let's add a circle collider matching the shape of the bird. We'll toggle the radius a bit to match the size of the bird. And you can see the green line outlining the collider's shape. So now we'll switch on the trigger. Now if the player collides with this bird, we'll get a message on the isTrigger function. So let's start creating a script. In scripts, we'll create a C# script for enemy controller. Okay, so this is our C# script. What all functions we want to do is, first we want a constant velocity movement in a particular direction. So for that we already know that we can either use a translate function. So we can call transform.translate. We want the movement to be in the y direction, so in the x direction. So if it's by this speed, you can also define the speed at the top. Now our enemy would move in a particular direction. We also want the direction to be left or right depending on which side the bird is facing currently. So we'll maintain a direction. This would be -1 for left and 1 for right. So let's multiply the speed with the direction. Now on trigger, let's copy the function from the collectible controller. So when the trigger is, whenever the player would collide with this object, we will get a notification as trigger. This function would be called, and we want to first check that whether the collider is from the collision is from the player or some other object. So for that, what we can do is other.gameobject dot name would return player. So I can either do other.gameObject.name equal player, or the other option is using a tag. So for example, if I were to compare it with the collectible, there can be say 10 collectibles, each would have a different name. So what we can do is we can add a tag here for the different kinds of objects. We can also create our own new tag. So for player, if I just set the tag to a player, here I can directly compare the tag of the object. So that way I don't have to worry about the actual name in the game. So in the coin control, the collectible controller, what we were doing was we were getting the controller of the player. We were then calling the collected function. So here we want to call a kill function. We haven't defined it yet, but let's go to the player controller, and yeah, here. So this is a one line function in which I'm just destroying the game object. So here I just called the destroy on the game object. So whenever this function would be called, the player would die. We can also add other functionalities such as showing a game over page or anything else here. But for now, we're just destroying the player for now. Now moving on to, so we don't want to kill the enemy right now. Otherwise, what we want to do is we want to flip the direction. So direction would be, so if the direction, we want the direction to flip to 1, and otherwise we want the direction to become -1. Another thing what we want to do is we want to flip the X part of the sprite. So if I show you, so right now let me just move the enemy a little bit. Right, so now if I click on flip, it just flips the sprite. It does not do anything else, just changes the sprite's image to a mirror image on the X coordinate. So what I want to do is I want to change the direction. So if the direction was -1, that is, it was originally facing left, the flip X was false. And so whenever the direction becomes right, I want to make the flip X as true. So I get the component, get component sprite renderer dot flip X is equal to true. And for the other one, I will make it false. Okay, so let's see if the script is working. Let's change the initial position of the player a little bit. Okay, so there is a compilation error. Yeah, we haven't defined, we did define. So we had a small typo here, which I have corrected. Okay, the speed was way too fast. Let me reduce it. Okay, so let's see what happens. So the ball vanishes. The motion is a little too subtle. The ball just suddenly vanishes without any sound effect or animations. So in the later videos, we'll see how we can improve the graphics by adding some animations when the player disappears. right now the functionality is complete. Now let's see what we in the next video how we can arrange all these. Basically we have now created an enemy prefab also. So in the prefabs we have the enemy prefab. This grass prefab is also ready. So let's rename it as grass or ground. We can also create so here in the plank, here in the sprites, we also have a plank sprite. So we can also create a plank. Again we can add, so in the player we were checking the collision with the, so in so we were checking the collision with the ground by adding this box collider to the ground. So to the player also we'll add another box collider. So to the plank we'll add a box collider which fits perfectly to the box automatically here. Okay, so we'll position this plank at a, say, okay, so let's try to climb this plank. So here's the ball. So it's able to climb the plank, and we can place some collectibles over the plank so that the player can collect them when it climbs over the plank. So this is how we'll now create our game slowly. So this plank would again constitute another prefab. So let's review what we did in this video. We learned to make an enemy prefab that moved constantly and changed its direction on collision with another object. We also ensured that the player gets destroyed on collision with the enemy. After that, we created a platform prefab on which the player can climb in order to collect different collectibles.